Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. This is that podcast where we try to help you get beyond all of the practical and maybe sometimes impractical things that are holding you back from leading a more international life, whether that has to do with starting a location-independent business, whether it has to do with just finding out about the places that are right for you. My name's Jonathan Lockwood. I am always here with James Guzman, but James running flippin' late. We've had all sorts of shit going on here because long about then, he realized that this was coming up. We had to reschedule this podcast. And then at the same time, I get a knock at the door. A huge shipment, I'm talking 11 boxes of mezcal arrived. And 2 of the bottles were broken, and I had to open them all up and try to communicate with these Spanish-speaking dudes. James is here. Welcome, James. So the mezcal arrived while all this happened. So I'm talking to Josh here. Do you want to try the new mezcal?
Yes.
Okay. Here's your shot glass. Josh, I wish you could try this for us. We haven't even introduced Josh yet.
Okay.
They're going to find out about it. All right,
Hi, Josh. How you doing?
Good.
This is the new Espadín.
Great.
I haven't even tried it yet.
Yeah.
Just try a little taste of it. So we got a new Espadín in from a friend of mine, my sort of business partner that explores out in the Campo. Here we go.
Yeah, that's great. I love this stuff.
All right. And a little bit later, when we're done with this, Job has made his first Tobalá, his own.
Oh, yeah?
He's an apprentice out there in the Campo with these guys. So we're going to try that in a minute.
Cool.
All right, back to the podcast here. Sorry, guys. So in his early 20s, Josh Linnes of Viva Tropic, by the way, the sort of descriptor is break free and thrive in the Latin tropics. In his early 20s, Josh traveled the world looking for the best places to surf. There was Samoa, Costa Rica, Indonesia, New Zealand, and Hawaii. He bought a small farm in Costa Rica, fell in love with the country, and eventually built a house there. He made money buying and selling real estate. Then, he met and fell in love with a girl, and stuff changed. His life before was simple, but it became more complicated when he realized he wanted to marry her and start a family. It meant changing his way of life. Would he start a multi-billion-dollar company? What about a desk job? He frigging hated desk jobs. He started doing land deals in New Mexico, Arizona, Alabama, and Tennessee, traveling the world, all the time traveling. He quit surfing to focus on business. He made a lot of money, the works, but he was getting fat. He wasn't able to surf, and he hated his life. So he threw in the corporate towel, rounded up his family, and made adventures a priority. They moved to Panama, then to Costa Rica, where they now live. He gets to surf every day, and Josh finally feels like himself again. Along with his business partner, Park Wilson, he discovers and develops real estate in remote areas of Central and South America. Bottom line, Josh and Park, with Viva Tropical, they want other would-be expats, maybe like you, to be better informed, to understand the different countries and what they have to offer, the country's business climates, the ins and outs of the buying process, and what it's really like to immerse yourself in another culture. Whatever your goal is, whether it's investing, buying property, or making Latin America your forever home, their expertise can help you make educated decisions. Welcome, Josh Linnes, to the Borderless Podcast.
First of all, thanks for having me.
Okay.
And secondly, with an introduction like that, I'm not even sure I can add anything on this podcast.
Well, yours was way longer on the site, man. I mean, it was, and ordinarily, I don't like to do long bios. I really chop them down. But damn it, it was so perfect. It was so, the story is exactly like the kind of story that a lot of our listeners have. And I knew it would be appealing to them. So I just pared it down and told your story. And it's a great story, man.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I might have to soundbite that for my own use.
Okay. Well, I'll email this to you. So anyway, Josh, Viva Tropical. Now, is there an update? You said on the website that this has been your world for 5 years there in Costa Rica. Is that the case, or has it been longer?
Well, there's kind of different versions, I guess, to the story. But originally, I came down when I was 18, and I'd been coming down to Costa Rica off and on for over 20 years, but then I moved down full-time with the family a little over 6 years ago to the current town I'm in. But I actually lived in Panama before that for a couple of years, and we moved from Costa Rica to Panama. So overall, we've lived down here longer. That stat refers directly to my time in Nosara, Costa Rica, where I live now.
Okay, very good. So tell us a little bit just about Costa Rica. I don't think we've actually done an episode on Costa Rica.
I did a
yet.
video with Scott Oliver.
We
do have a Costa Rica person there. But anyways, yeah.
Okay, so why don't you just give us the 1 minute on why you love Costa Rica so much?
Well, I'm not actually a huge fan of Costa Rica.
Okay. Do you notice, James, how nobody pulls any punches? We always think people are going to be, trying to give us the old line there and do the sales job, and they're all like, I kind of fucking hate it, sometimes they say.
What's the, there's this very popular magazine about living overseas, and for some reason I can't think of it right now, but that's what everybody says, that every article that they come out is like, oh, it's the best place in the world. Costa Rica is the best place in the world. Mexico is the best place in the world. Any other place other than the United States to go is great. So it's good to have some kind of a good range of views on different places to get the real deal.
We appreciate it. We appreciate the honesty. So go ahead. You're not a huge fan of it. So tell us what you do like and what you don't.
Well, I explore this whole region. I've spent time in pretty much every country but Belize. I've drove down from the U.S. through Mexico down here. So I have a lot of experience in these different places. And I just think generalizing a country is ridiculous. It's like generalizing the U.S. Like, I love the U.S. But you don't really live in the U.S. You live in a certain part of the U.S. And if you love that part, well, that's fine. It doesn't mean you like other parts. I mean, ask anyone in Alabama if they want to live in New York City, and they're not going to like America all of a sudden. So for me, Costa Rica is like a lot of third world countries. It can be difficult to do business in. There's stupid laws that cause friction. It's a pain in the butt in some ways. But what I found was this town that I loved. And what I really love about it is there's just a lot of other people. Like, I guess this is pretty much everyone, but you like places where there's people like you. I wanted an international experience for my children, for me. And when I left to move to Panama years ago, I left Costa Rica thinking I'll never go back. The main reason for that wasn't anything horrible about Costa Rica. It was just that it didn't feel like traveling anymore. Costa Rica is probably, in terms of indigenous culture, is probably the least exciting place all the way from Mexico down to Tierra del Fuego. It's a different place in that way. And I think that's in large part made this country work really well, because I think in a place like Mexico, you certainly see this. When you have indigenous culture and it's some form of democracy or republic, the indigenous culture has rights and they fight, and so things can be kind of slower in terms of progression of a tourist industry in particular. What's nice about Costa Rica is that they rely heavily on tourism in terms of dollarization. It's their largest contributor to GDP, and I believe that's in large part, that's a function of that there isn't a lot of culture here fighting over old ways and new ways. So that part's great. I love the town I'm in because where else can you live on the beach in a town of a few thousand people and have a private school or a school at all that you believe in for your children, and then live with a bunch of other people that also value that. So it kind of, in a way, I was kind of jumped by Costa Rica. To be completely honest, how I ended up here, it was a compromise. It was a place that I wanted South America, the northern part, somewhere maybe Colombia, Ecuador, Peru. My wife said, I don't want to move somewhere again that I've never lived before, because we had tried that. Personally, I liked it. She did not. She wanted to go to Mexico because we love Mexico a lot. I didn't want to move there based on, at the time, it was health and safety concerns, the children of the places that we really liked. And then we said, fine, let's just both go to somewhere we hate. And that's a good compromise. And that was Costa Rica. And now 6 years later, I absolutely am so happy we chose to live here.
How old are you, Josh?
40. I just turned 40.
40. And how old are your kids?
Kids are, how old are they? They're 6 and 10. Okay. Boy is the 10 and daughter is 6. They've been in the school here my son's been in it for 6 years and my daughter's been in it for now 3.
Beautiful. And you bought a small farm there, right?
Yeah, well, that was when I was 18,
Oh, okay.
Another 20 years before. Gotcha. And I bought a small farm. That was down in Dominical, the southern zone of Costa Rica. And that's when I started first coming down. And at that time, there was what's not to love. I was 18. I just got out of high school. I think any younger people who are listening to this have that. I was just in the U.S., and it certainly still seems to be true. When you're hanging out with 20-year-olds, there's this pressure to define who you are and what you're going to be. And everybody asks you about it constantly if you're in your 20s. What are you going to do? Where are you doing? Where's college? At that time, I was down in Costa Rica a lot, surfing every day. And then I had a bunch of friends who came down with me. And so we were hanging out in little village towns and with zero of that pressure and really just loving it and had time to really think about what it was we wanted to do. So it was a very gratifying and fun time.
This hatred of the corporate culture or corporate America, if you will, I mean, it's something that it seems to me, maybe I just wasn't paying close attention to it, but I mean, it seems like it's pretty widely considered nasty today. I don't know if 20 years ago it really was, but some of us were kind of ahead of the curve. I can remember being in my early 20s and thinking, I do not want to work for another motherfucking company again and have these idiot bosses. But very early on, you had this thought about rejecting that kind of thing. Why don't you talk about that for a minute? What did you almost go that route? Well, you kind of did go that route in a way, even though you were an entrepreneur. What did you like and what did you hate about it?
Well, I guess it really just was beliefs instilled in me growing up. I grew up on a little island in Northwest Washington on the San Juan Islands. It was called Orcas Island. It was only 56 square miles. It was a small community, not unlike the one I live in now. And I guess part of it was, for one, I was raised differently than many people in the U.S. just based on that experience, even though they were, normal Americans. But then when I was in high school, I even realized that, you're forced to go to school, but I just didn't see a lot of value in being a student and studying things. I was always a hands-on, if we're going to learn about making pizzas, let's start spinning some dough. Let's not read the theory about how to spin dough.
Right.
And so when I got out of school, it was very much about how do I get my hands in things and touch things and that are fun to do. And I don't know a lot of corporate life that even allows for that. Mm-hmm. And secondly, I guess mentors or whoever kind of instilled the belief in me that I should do something that I'm passionate about. And I do remember quite clearly in my 20s, 18, when I graduated high school, the first thing I did right after graduating on this tiny island was I bought a ticket to New Zealand with a friend. Flew around the world and spent 6 months on the opposite side of the world. It was the very first thing I did. And that just opened my eyes to there's a place somewhere out there in our big world that you can do what you want to do and how you want to do it. And once I started thinking that way, it was less about that corporate American culture was negative and more about that there's just so many possibilities in this world that are fun to pursue and learn about that. Why would I be limited to just that?
Gotcha. Yeah. So things happen, I call them life quakes. I don't know where I heard that, but for me, the life quake I had several years ago was kind of negative. Sometimes it's very positive. In your case, it looks like getting married and the decision to start a family led to a whole other host of things. Things changed when that thought occurred to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what happened for me was I've always done real estate. I've been a professional real estate investor only my entire life. So I'm about 22 years into that. And at some point when I was about to get married, I was looking for more consistency in my life. And I just knew that even though I had done well, the God's honest truth was it was lucky. I hadn't seen cycles. I hadn't seen ups and downs. And I thought to expand my knowledge of understanding that, I should be more professional at my approach to real estate investment. And so I kind of went on a sojourn type thing where pretty negative really, but I ended up going to Phoenix and didn't really like that. I went to New Mexico and lived in Santa Fe and I liked that. But I just realized that it's not, I just gone from traveling the world to that and driving basically 40 minutes a day down to Albuquerque where my market was and owned several different houses there. And it just, like anything, I think it's easy to get excited about things. And then when you realize what the nuts and bolts are actually about, that it kind of deteriorates some of that excitement. So it just wasn't that fun. So I was going to expand my business into a more corporate approach and partnered up with a company that was more corporate. Ended up like wearing a suit all the time and meeting with bankers and doing loans, and it was just a more I guess sterile life, but also more formal. Mm-hmm. And it just didn't agree with me at all. And when I had my first kid, I'd read some book about how what a kid learns in their first 6 years is largely 80 to 90% based on your behavior, meaning the father and the mother's behavior and the way their relationship is. Mm-hmm. And so then I thought, well, if I want to be a good leader for this kid, I need to live a life that I'm excited about every single day. And that was that. That was the end of that career.
That's beautiful, man. That's a great reason to change your life. That didn't last though long, really, that period of your life, did it?
The part where I was suffering?
Yes.
No, it didn't last long at all. And that was it. Like, I mean, the bio kind of reads in a way, my bio on the website I'm referring to, kind of reads in a way like I kind of suffered a lot, but I really didn't. It was maybe 2 years that I had given to that. But also, the ironic thing was I made just as much money, if not more, when I was traveling more and doing things like more adventurous. And so it wasn't, I think if I was in the corporate life and it was extremely fruitful in terms of money, that may have changed because I was definitely looking for security then. But it wasn't, and so it really allowed me to move out of that. And by doing so, it put value on things like having time to think about your next move is important, and having the influence of travel and other cultures certainly gives you a new perspective on things. And even though it's not quantifiable in a per hour, income, it's certainly quantifiable when you start seeing that you can see things in different ways, and that can be really valuable in business.
Right. So you wanted a life that you could be excited about, and you started moving in that direction. What did you do?
Well, I went back to the old well that had been serving me so good over the time, and that was I went back to Costa Rica. So I had a business partner that wasn't a formal business partner. How it worked was I had this company. I worked with the company. I was a partner with the company, and Park was a partner with the company. But Park and I were not partners. But we began bonding on some of the corporate ski trips, and we just saw things in different ways. And at that time, also just timing-wise, that's a huge part to do with it, we just knew that the U.S. economy was heated up to a high. We knew the real estate market was going to crash just because we were just so intimately involved with the loan stage, because what we were doing was like rent to owns. So we knew that we could acquire a house and sell it, and anybody who wanted to buy it, and I mean anybody, could get a loan. And that just isn't sustainable. And we could tell that part, at least. We were able to identify that. And so part of why I ended up in New Mexico and Arizona and then in Memphis was we were looking for markets that hadn't appreciated too much because we were expecting a crash.
Right.
Well, so during conversations on the ski lift, I said, well, let's go to South America. It's fun, or Central America. It's fun. There's lots of opportunity. And to be completely honest, this is a really key point. It's just not as an efficient of a market in Central America. So you're rewarded for putting in time, elbow grease, and effort. In the U.S., you don't get rewarded that heavily for that because it's so unbelievably efficient. And what I mean by that is there's an MLS system. You can call any broker or real estate agent in a town and probably have as good of an idea of what values are and what's a good deal in that town as you can by knocking on everybody's door. Now, there is some efficiency to be gained by knocking on everybody's door in terms of finding a good deal, but not so much so. Well, down in Central America, there is no MLS. There's basically no efficiency. If I walk into the town of Nosara, Costa Rica, and talk to a real estate agent, and then go 10 miles away to a town of Samara, which is literally, I think, about 10 miles apart, even though on a dirt road it's 30 minutes apart, these two people have absolutely no idea what's happening in the other guy's market. And I mean nothing. Like, they don't know prices, they don't know anything. So we saw tremendous opportunity in that if we're willing to look at this region as a whole, there's tremendous efficiency to be gained. And if we're willing to jump in a dugout canoe, ride a horse, hike through the jungle, camp on the beach, get lost in the middle of nowhere, that there's a good chance we're going to find some deals. And then, then I was back on my path of mixing adventure and work.
Well, how did you get started doing that? Once you decided that you wanted to go down to Central America, what was your first step to do that?
Well, the first step was, this goes back to the first farm I bought when I was 18. And when I bought that farm, it kind of created gravity in my life, especially as it relates to the real estate market in the area I bought it, in Dominical and Costa Rica. And what I mean by that is every time I'd go down, I'd have to pay attention to what was happening in the real estate market. And inevitably, things change as you keep going down year over year over year. And so I started having a really good understanding of what works and what doesn't. Because I was always, what should I do with mine? Do I want to build? Do I want to subdivide? Do I want to put in water? Do I want to just leave it? Do I want to plant it? Do I want to turn it into a fruit farm? Whatever. And I had some contacts who are equally as excited about real estate as me. And so when I'd go down, we'd jump in a car and just go look at everything that was new for sale and talk about it. So I had a really good foundation in what works and what doesn't. And then, of course, just being a real estate investor in general, certainly I believe the old adage, you make your money when you buy, which just means get a good deal. Then you'll be in a much better position than you wouldn't be. And so we needed context. And so the first thing we did was we started up in northern Nicaragua, looking across the border into El Salvador. And we just drove the entire Pacific coast and talked to every single agent, real estate person we could find, farmers, and we just started collecting a database of what's for sale, how much it is per square meter, what its good attributes are. And that gave us a tremendous amount of insight into what's for sale, what its benefits are. And then we started adding in like towns, like one town's hot, one town's not. How come? Why? What was happening there? What was going on there to create that? And then that led to our whole investment philosophy. And I don't know if you guys have seen it, but we have a free ebook actually called Pay Dirt, and that's more or less what it's about. And we developed something called the Market Stages System through this process that we use all the time. And it's a way to compare, say, we call it stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Stage 1 is defined as land in an area being sold agriculturally based on agricultural values, which you still find sometimes in Central America, less and less these days. And stage 5 is a fully functioning town. So what it did was it gave us a way to make a comparison between San Juan del Sur and Tamarindo and, maybe like somewhere like Huatulco in Oaxaca. So we needed some way to how do you make an objective comparison in these places? And the stage system was our way of doing that. And that's more or less how we laid the foundation. And then from there, it was just what's the best deal and having confidence that it was the best deal.
Yeah, I'm looking at that, the page that you have for that. So it's called Pay Dirt. We're going to put this in the show notes. Pay Dirt, a framework for profit abroad. And I was just thinking, boy, talk about getting your hands in the pizza dough. I mean, the way you just started traveling, down the Pacific coast and figuring it out and assessing all of these different properties for other people. You deserve the success that comes from hard work like that.
Yeah, and I think it was, it just was fun. So, I mean, we've had a lot of adventures. We've been stranded in the middle of nowhere. I've had boats run out of gas and had to swim to shore. We've had horses that I'll give you a quick story that we were in Boquete, which is Panama, northern Panama. Mm-hmm. And there's a mountain there, and there's a town of Boquete that's on the tallest mountain in Panama called Volcan. Very popular retirement spot. And they were putting in this new road that was connecting Boquete to another town called Volcan, and it was called the Southern Route. These two places weren't too far as the crow flies, but as the road drove, you had to actually go all the way back down the mountain, take a highway, and go back up the mountain to get to Boquete, which is about 2-3 hours, and instead of maybe becoming 40 minutes. And why it mattered was because people love the mountain climate in Boquete, but it was just so far to get to Volcan that it wasn't a viable market at the time. So Park and I keep track of what's happening in government records. We got our tip that the funding had been approved for this road. And so we said, all right, let's go explore it so we can go find the hot stuff before there's even a road there. So we hired a couple of horses. We called someone who said, yeah, you can meet my friend, whoever, and he's got a couple of horses. And we go down there early in the morning, packed up. We know that the whole route's about 10, 12 miles. And so we're kind of expecting to be back by midday at this point. Mm-hmm. We didn't really pack much as far as a lunch, but we got there, and the horses, first of all, we have some email that refers to them as overgrown dogs. And I feel like that's probably accurate. Okay. Park is like 6'2" or 3", skinny guy with long legs. And I swear his feet were almost brushing the ground. And we start heading out. And if you know the topography there, it's very, there's a lot of canyons. Like over the years of water carving down these volcanoes, there's deep canyons. And it's this way in San Jose, and you'd barely notice it in Costa Rica. But there's these deep canyons that without a bridge, it's a long ways to get to the other side because you got to go down and up. Well, we start heading out, and within 10 minutes, my horse slips and falls with me on it, like rolling on the ground, and pops back up. And luckily it was light, so it was like, it was like wrestling a dog back up. I wasn't too worried about that. But then in the next 5 minutes, we got to the edge of this giant canyon, and it's basically straight down, total rock path, no dirt. And then on the rock path is like little rock pebbles that are more like marbles as far as I'm concerned. And every step I was so scared because the horse already fell. About an hour and a half into our descent, my confidence grew because I finally had the thought that, hey, this horse, unless it's suicidal, doesn't want to die. So it's going to be doing its best to try to save both of us. Right. So I started feeling a lot better when I realized that. The day was a total bust. The entire day before dark, all we did was get to the bottom of the canyon because it was just so steep. So we had to go back home, recalibrate our plans. But that's kind of a snapshot of what it's always like. There's always epic failures before we have any sort of success, but the epic failures are really fun.
You've got two websites I'm seeing here, Josh. The one that I originally found was Viva Tropic, and the other one is called Emerging Terrains. I'm wanting to properly, pigeonhole you for our listeners. What is Emerging Terrains and what is Viva Tropic?
Well, they're two different times. Originally, our company was called Emerging Terrains, and it's still us. And we had basically an investment-only website, and that's what you're seeing with Emerging Terrains. And then later on, we decided that the market of information, as referenced earlier in this podcast, can often be looked at through rose-colored glasses. And we thought there just was room for somebody being a little bit more neutral in tone, basically like old journalism was. Instead of everything being about an opinion and an agenda, it's more of, here, let us try to present the information in as neutral way as we can, and then let the reader decide if that meshes with them or not. I've been actually talking about this a lot. There's a real negative consequence to some of those magazines, International Living, Live and Invest. That was the one I was
thinking about. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and they're great at what they do. But one thing I've noticed, in particular with International Living, is they're just so good at what they do that they get people to move places that they may not really be prepared to live. And that has a pretty big impact on that community, because if you get somewhere and it's not what you expect, then by definition, you're going to be you're angry. It wasn't what you expected. And then you're basically just creating a group of angry people in these communities. I've seen that happen, and it mostly revolves around expenses. Boquete was one of those spots I watched this happen, where International Living basically pimped it out as a cheap place to live, and it's just not as cheap as they said. And so people moved there on fixed incomes, and they were screwed. They were in a really tough position because they failed to mention that there's a lot of inflation in these little countries. Really fast it happens, especially when they're riding highs and lows of total production like Panama. Panama had $28 billion dumped into its economy in the last 6 years, and that had a huge effect on just what daily things cost. Bread, and they call it the bread basket there, how they define these daily things. And now I see this happening in Cuenca, Ecuador, where you're just saying, move, 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 it's cheap, it's awesome, it's unbelievable. But as the expenses change, people are in an uncomfortable position, And then it really changes the fabric of a town. On the flip side, what's interesting about where we live, and I'm sure where you guys live too, is that people choose to live there. I mean, that's not an American, that isn't an American normal, that isn't a normal step that people take. Most people, it's based on economics, it might be based on schools, but Central America almost all entirely is based on where do you think you want to live, which makes it unique because there's several towns where people love the town, they love being there, and it creates a real positive attitude around your interactions with everybody because they think they live in the best place in the world, and they chose it that. So they, there's a little responsibility there. If you mess with that balance by sending people down based on purely on economics, and then it doesn't pan out, I feel like that's a real negative consequence, and should be at least be considered by anyone moving anywhere. Make sure you love it, not just based on how cheap it is.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And also on the flip side, is advice for other people that are doing business, is not only recommending places, being careful where you recommend, but what you're recommending, what you're selling, and that it's actually good for the person. People say that and say, yeah, sure, nobody actually follows that. But you really should, be recommending something that you would want to buy yourself, or that you're honest about. I have had some jobs and other things that I've done in my life that I had to stop just because I didn't think that it was actually benefiting my clients, and so I had to be without an income. But I'd rather be without income than messing up a lifetime relationship with people, because that's what you get with clients and people that you work with is a lifelong relationship, and that's your reputation.
Yeah, I think, and that's such a huge part of it. I mean, that's it. You nailed it. When it comes to international living, they're a corporation that has no social responsibility after you buy their ebook and go to their seminar. And it can be sometimes that way with real estate brokers. Transaction's over, and now I'm moving on. Park and I, even if we wanted to be complete dicks, we couldn't be, because we sell property. And we have the relationship with people who often do financing or whatever, and you're with them for like 10 years after that. So you realize that, and one, you start making a kind of an emphasis on who you're going to be living next to, because that becomes more important. But two, you really treat them with respect, because it's just bad business, and you can't just walk away like you can in like an ebook transaction.
I could not agree more. That's so important to maintain your reputation. Josh, we need to pay some attention to our sponsor, and we'll get back to the interview. Today's Borderless Podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group, your online leader in promoting moral superiority. Last month, Bill Clinton claimed his wife Hillary was a victim of a right-wing conspiracy, and there was nothing at all to her email scandal. In June, a religious right pundit claimed that Christians were the victims of homofascism. Recently, a Philadelphia dentist caught groping his patient's breasts said he is a victim of frotteurism, a disease that compels him to fondle breasts. To many people, this trend is troubling, but not to the Condescending Group. In her article last week, condescending columnist Tiffany Twiddle explains that just as there's been an advance of economic ages, from agrarian to industrial to corporate to information to entrepreneurial, so too culture has advanced from the honor and dignity cultures finally to today's victim culture, and we should learn to embrace that reality. While it's true that in former times people could maintain a certain self-respect, putting actual work into gaining accomplishments and earning things, it's too hard and just unrealistic in this day and age, while simply claiming victim is the easiest way to get attention. And when people question you, your righteous indignance immediately delivers you a level of moral superiority. Perfect. Now you don't have to achieve nor earn, but instead whine, cry, bitch, and moan with a quivery lip. This ends up leaving you more time to drink wine, take yoga classes, and appreciate shitty art. And self-respect? Ha! Just hang around other whiny do-nothing victims all your life and you'll have no need for it. Go to thecondescendinggroup.com now for more of this brilliant shit. The Condescending Group, they care more than you. Okay, so we're back to our interview on the Borderless Podcast with Josh Linnes of Viva Tropic. He and his business partner, Park Wilson, wrote an ebook called Pay Dirt, a framework for profit abroad. And it's basically, the selling point is want 19 years of investment experience in one day. So we know James did a Survey Monkey here a couple of months ago, and one of the top things that our listeners of the Borderless Podcast want is to learn about investing and living and banking in other countries. And so it sounds like we hit pay dirt here, because folks, if you're interested in this, and we know a lot of you are, these guys know what the hell they're talking about and can probably guide you into making the right decisions for you.
Yeah, well, I would add to that to get that, it may be a fairly convoluted path, but I can at least explain to readers how they get that ebook and others. We have several free ones. We actually have a free one called Offshore Strategy, and our current free one is on vivatropical.com. You'll get a pop-up, and it asks you to sign up. And that is called Top 57 Places to Live and Invest Overseas. And that's a very, very thorough write-up of what we're calling the top 57 places, 57 towns. It's over 200 pages, tons of pictures. And then each town has kind of a rating of like cost of living, odds of appreciating in the next 5 years. And so it's a very handy tool to just get situated with where maybe you want to go. And it covers our whole region. We work less in Mexico. We certainly cover it, but Mexico to Ecuador is basically where we're aiming. Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, if you sign up, you will eventually get paid through the emails that you get.
Mm-hmm. The Offshore Strategy. I've been, ever since that came out of your mouth, I'm looking for this ebook. How do I find it? I'm not finding it.
I think it might be offshore.vivatropical.com.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I think what we ended up doing with that, because we like pictures and making stuff look pretty, was we actually ended up using public domain photos from the 1920s to do that whole book.
Okay.
And it was, I would say that it's hard to tell if it was as popular or not, but for some reason, we took it out of the easy to access rotation, mostly because I think, if anything, it's less about, that particular book was less about the nuts and bolts of opening an account overseas and more about the reasons why you should consider it.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like you made the transition correctly. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. I mean, you'd been a successful real estate investor before that, so you had some money to be able to make this transition, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and
I had some money to make the transition.
Yeah, and so once you came, you started kicking the tires with your friend, and you set up this. I guess the original one was emerging. What is it? Emerging
terrains.
Emerging terrains. So how long did it take before you started making a profit on that?
Well, immediately. I mean, it was, well, that's not true. It wasn't immediate. It was very close to immediate, but let me back that up a bit. Mm-hmm. What we had done, we were looking for deals. Like, that's what we do. We look for deals that we think are profitable and fit our core competency, what we're good at. My core competency really was pretty strong in Central America because of the farm that I bought at a young age. Park was not, and so a lot of developing that was the traveling that we were doing. And so what we were looking for was, where do we do our first project? And that process, before we got to our first project, probably took 4 to 5 months. But before we did that, we were really trying to determine what country do we think's best for doing that. So we got to Costa Rica. We combed the coast back and forth. And our conclusion at that time, this was before the crash, that it was probably a little overheated. The only thing that we could do to make money was to build something like condominiums. And we just had this fear in the back of our minds that the crash was going to come and it may affect what was happening in Costa Rica. And it was fairly obvious, because I will say that I had no idea that the crash was going to be what the crash was. I just thought it was going to be specific to real estate. And I thought that it would affect Costa Rica, because what you were seeing at that time in Costa Rica was people were coming down with home equity money from the U.S. and slamming it into properties in Costa Rica as a hedge, because they were concerned. And so you didn't need to, have to be too smart to realize that if they can't come down and drop home equity money into this market, then the market will change fundamentally. So we were concerned about that, which pushed us a little bit more to the edges. And so we started considering Nicaragua, which was a little less popular. We love Nicaragua. We still do. But then I had a friend who said, hey, you got to check out Panama. So we drove down to Panama. And it was just immediately obvious at that time, Panama was way undervalued. So why was that obvious? Well, infrastructure, really good highways, which in Costa Rica, you have okay highways. And in Nicaragua, you have maybe slightly better than Costa Rica, surprisingly. And you had prices that were incredibly cheap. And at some point, and you're seeing this in Ecuador now, at some point, no matter, you can pay like, say, $500 for an acre, or maybe, 20,000 for an acre on the water. And there's just an intrinsic value there of almost, I would say, at least 50,000 per half acre if it's waterfront anywhere. So again, this wasn't about being smart and hashing numbers. This was just about, as one mentor called it, Bo Derek running down the beach. Gives you some degree of his age. But when Bo Derek's running down the beach, you don't really need to know anything to know she's hot. And that was the kind of deal we were looking for. So what we ended up doing was we ended up buying an island, Boca Chica Island, it's called. And it's a 400-acre island off of Panama. We put together a group of investors, bought that island, and are doing a project on it now. And before that, to get to that point, took about 4 months, I'd say. But we were really, literally driving every day. And we went to Panama. We knew it was so good that we left our wives alone with the babies in Costa Rica and holed up in some hotel in David that was like $20 a night for a month, and just went every single day and looked at property.
Well, I'm really interested in what your approach is. I'm sure you have something. You have a kind of a gut feeling that this is a good property, this is undervalued or overvalued or whatever. But when you go in and try to look at it more technically, what does your process look like of judging whether something is over or undervalued?
It goes back to that stage system. It goes back to, I think what a lot of people forget about down here is, and this is everywhere, that they're in a local market and they become pretty familiar with a customer. And that customer, if you think about it, that customer is so far down the idea of buying something that they actually traveled to a location or walked into a real estate office. Meaning that if someone goes into San Miguel real estate office, they obviously decided Mexico, they at least are considering it. They decided San Miguel could work, or they're at least considering it. And they've made it that far. So down the education path, they're quite a bit more educated, say, than someone who says Central America could be cool to live and do a real estate search. Now, the point of that is if somebody is saying Central America could be cool and do a real estate search, what they're doing is they're shopping all over. I always get inquiries from people that say things like, I'm considering the Seychelles, but I also like Eastern Nicaragua or Corn Island or something like that. And so what I'm getting at here is it's all about knowing your market. That's how you sell. You have to know who the buyer is. And we always start with who's the buyer. We don't do anything without thinking about who's the buyer, why would they want it, and how does this product compete in our region at least, and at least worldwide, especially because everything's moved to the web now. And I really believe this, and I'll give a little secret out to everybody. It's not about anything else but the picture on your website now. That drives all commerce down here. It's one picture, two pictures. That's what's getting Airbnb, VRBO. It's one picture. So I actually now look at it like, can I get that one picture from this property?
Huh.
Speaking of properties, I'm looking at the website, and it's you guys have got to check out vivatropical.com. There's a drop down when you click on menu, and they've got 9 different countries under real estate, and you click on it, and you will see right away like I just clicked on Panama, and I got to ask you about this, Josh. Example. Here are a few examples. They show an entry for 3-bedroom penthouse for sale in the Playa Blanca Resort, Panama. 3-bedroom, 2,300 square feet, $379,900. Okay. Then we look at the next one. 3-bedroom house for sale in El Coco, La Chorrera, Panama. 2,799 square feet, $150,000. Then we scoot down here. Stunning island for sale in the Pacific Ocean between Panama City and Punta Chame, Panama. $12. What? That's got to be a mistake. What's $12?
I think that sounds like a mistake.
Okay, good. Go to vivatropical.com. They're selling islands for $12.
Yeah, okay. No, that's definitely a mistake.
Okay,
that website pulls several of its listings directly from other realtors' listings.
Gotcha.
And occasionally a field like that happens. I saw one recently that was a farm of 100 acres that was like 25 million. And I was like, this can't be right. And so we emailed them, and they were like, oh, whoops, put the comma in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you more about what you were just saying. So you've found that for real estate listings, only having one or at the most two pictures is what you get the most response with?
No, what I'm saying is that, and that's an oversimplification. What I'm saying is that all commerce, real estate commerce in Central America, starts with the internet.
I see.
And you can search Nicaragua and then search Panama within 5 seconds of each other. Of course, you can't do that when you're down here. That's a giant pain in the ass to even get from one country to the other. But you can do that then as you're trying to define what works for you or not. But then when you start defining what works for you, it's certainly some of the stats that Jonathan was just saying about price and location. But then the ultimate selling feature is the picture. Does the buyer or potential buyer see themselves living in that spot? And that's why the picture matters. It's because it's, like I said, people are choosing to live down here 85, 90% of the time because they want to and they think it's good for them. And so then the question is, what property fits their fantasy?
Right.
What does that fantasy look like? And that's one picture.
Yeah, something that I don't know if it kind of fits in here, but an idea for people that I have used and I will plan on using more also in the future is I'm a photographer and I also have a wide angle lens and I know how to take architectural photography. It doesn't take long to learn how to do that. And what you can do is you go on Airbnb, and if somebody has a nice property, then on a place that you're planning on going to, just send them a message and say, hey, I'm a photographer and I can, here's some examples of pictures I've taken. Can I stay there for free for these dates or at a discount? And so that's kind of a way that you can use those pictures to help other people.
Yeah, that's a good hack, and that just shows you that if people are willing to do that tells you how important pictures are, especially when it's a romantic idea of Central America, the tropics. And that's how Airbnb's getting these places filled, is by, serving that romantic idea. And really, it's no different for us. But what I'm getting at is that really, really, really good property that fits that romantic image. And by that romantic image, we can just imagine what it's like to live on a white sand beach with palm trees, or live up in the jungle with a view down a coastal region like you have down here. Then the properties that serve that need the best are the most successful. And then you start, figuring out price. You have to know markets and understand, what and how not to overpay. But that very basic idea will take people a long ways in being successful.
Yeah, you have a great online presence with all these different websites. It sounds like you've been in real estate for a long time, and obviously anything is any market that you're in, it's good to be good on kind of internet marketing and stuff. But it looks like you're exceptional with that. I don't know. How did you learn to do that? Have you hired somebody that helped you with that, or is that something that you've also been into, is kind of internet marketing?
Well, no. We had to get good at it, and to tell you the truth, how we got good at it was we bought this property, we bought that island, And then we found this other remote region in Panama that actually, that island is not even that remote. It's like a mile away from the mainland. And it's literally, you can like grab your bags off the plane in David and be on that island in 40 minutes. So I say that because our other property that we bought, that project was called Playa Barica. Playa Barica is about 2.5 hours from David. And when we very first bought it, you had to actually drive down a beach 2 hours to get to it, which caused problems, obviously. And when I assumed, like, logic in my head, I was thinking, well, if you have to drive down the beach to get to this area, because there's a little town down there, if you have to drive down the beach, well, then the beach obviously isn't hard to drive down if everybody drives down it every day. I mean, how could it be? This was a logic leap I was making. When I got there, it was hard. It was insane. It was like this rocky reef that, as we drove Park's Toyota truck down there, my Land Cruiser, it looked like a Toyota commercial. You could only go like 1 mile an hour, which then caused the problem of you could only be out on the property a certain amount of time before the tide changed, because you'd get stuck. So in doing that, the economy crashed right after we bought that. I bought that for personal reasons, surfing, and I just loved it out there. The economy crashed, and then we decided that the island that we had purchased, we weren't going to be selling that because it was a high-end kind of thing. At the time, we were going to just sell the island as a whole. And so it just made sense that this Playa Barica project was the easiest thing to sell. That obviously doesn't sound too easy. So it was really then that we started getting good at internet marketing, because we needed to for that project. When we bought that property in Playa Barica and there was no road to it, we knew that there was a road coming, and we knew the funding was there. So we were 85, 90% sure that there would be a road down to it eventually. That started breaking ground, and then that enabled us to be able to think that we could sell it. And so we realized that our only chance is going to be the internet, because as the economy crashed, so did all the local real estate economies in Central America. And you started seeing, at the height, like in Boquete is a good example. In Boquete, there was 30 different real estate offices before the crash, and then it went down to, I think, 3 to 5 now. So it was a massive contraction. And our property out in Playa Barica wasn't that expensive, so the commission wouldn't be that high. So you're asking a lot for someone to drive 2 hours down a beach, for $500 or $600. Because there was $50,000 for oceanfront properties there. So all of it fell on us to be able to market it. And that's really where we started learning how to do it. I've always been into photography like you. I've been using a camera for years and years. And so I felt confident in making it look good. But then there was all sorts of things to learn about how do you make it look good. And it's interesting because if someone's at home in the US, Canada, Europe, and they're looking for property, what we found is a lot of people will do it for a hobby. They're genuinely interested, but it's fun for them to check what's out there. And so we developed the site to work that way. We developed it so that you could explore the site. We actually paid guys to walk down the property lines with a machete and videoed that. We called it a lot tour. And so you could get a boundary line tour, and you could see, oh, okay, well, that's more or less how big it is, and that's what the ocean front looks like, and that literally is the ocean front of, say, Lot 16. And then we do a lot tour where we walk more on the internal parts and then show more area stuff. And what we started seeing was we didn't have many people going to the website, but the people who did go watched everything and did everything. And then it really, surprisingly, even to us at the time, was it started selling really fast.
We hear constantly about the wisdom of investing in international real estate. And, it's just one of, for a person from the U.S. trying to get money out of the U.S. or trying to protect it somehow, some way, international real estate is a great idea. But one question that comes up all of the time for people from the States who are used to getting mortgages, what options are there, if any, for any type of mortgage or loan, whether it's short-term or long-term in these countries where you sell real estate?
Well, we have provided owner financing because there really isn't a lot of good options. In Costa Rica, you can get a loan, but the LTV is very often somewhere like 70%, and it's of their appraisal, and so they were burned in the crash.
The LTV, I'm sorry, help me out. What's LTV?
Oh, thank you for asking me that.
Sure.
That's loan to value.
Oh, gotcha.
So it means your down payment. So if it's an 80% LTV, that means they'll loan you 80%, but you got to come up with 20%.
Right.
So in the case of Costa Rica, they'll loan you 60, 70%, but you got to come up with the rest. And then the qualification process is cumbersome and takes forever. So it's really prohibitive. It is an option and it is possible, but barely anybody uses that option because it takes because it's just so difficult to do. I think Mexico has better programs. Mexico is just a totally different animal than the rest of the countries that we cover because it's like a top 10 GDP market in the world. I mean, it's huge and massive and different and varied in ways that these other countries aren't. But you can get loans and there's hard money and things like that, but it just ultimately doesn't make much sense. And then a lot of people, it's obviously prohibitive for any buyers coming in who want to use leverage, who want to use a mortgage. But then a lot of people who put in their cash, they really like it that way because it's, especially if they believe in the market, which one of the benefits of Costa Rica. Everybody is very confident in Costa Rica as a country. It's a place to put money and feel safe. It may not be the greatest return, but it's safe.
We're talking again with Josh Linnes, who along with his business partner, Park Wilson, run the website Viva Tropic, break free and thrive in the Latin tropics. You're going to find a lot of great articles on this website too. And examples, 6 myths about expat life in Boquete, busted. Is Antigua, Guatemala for you? Top 93 Panama websites for expats and investors. What makes Playa Herradura, Costa Rica, different from its neighbors? So it's just a font of information here for somebody who is in fact interested in relocating, making their money go further perhaps, and figuring out a way to live internationally, particularly in Central America. So where to from here, Josh? What are your plans for the future?
Well, I have been liking where I'm living. Like the town where I live in Nosara, I wasn't really a believer in the real estate market here the last 4 or 5 years, and I have come around now, and I'm going to most likely buy property. I didn't even buy a property. I've been renting because I just felt like, as an investment point of view, it's absolutely inexpensive to rent $1 million home, and if you don't know, the tropic coastal area is a maintenance nightmare. So not that prohibits anyone from buying, but it is a calculation that should be considered when thinking about upkeep. So I feel like I'm renting places for less than their maintenance. Recently, though, there has been a real uptick in people moving here and building. And so I'm pretty optimistic about this area. I'm liking Costa Rica again, honestly. I'm back into it because it's the most efficient market in Central America. I feel like Panama is kind of heading towards being overvalued. It's not there yet. Now, again, I'm describing these terms from an investment point of view. If you're actually considering moving somewhere, buying a house and living, Panama is still a great deal. But if you want to buy, say, 1,000 acres, it's way more expensive than it used to be and probably a bit prohibitive. I also think that I like Nicaragua. So when you ask that question, we're open to a lot of things. We're going to keep our head down on the road and see what we can find. We're particularly interested now in areas that that work well for, say, short-term rentals. With the invention of Airbnb and VRBO now, that's really changed the short-term rental market and made it very efficient for somebody not in these countries to rent a place. And if you have, the feedback and stuff matters, but if you have a good house, you can really, really do well. And I mean, you're seeing guys grossing over $100,000 a year in 3-bedroom houses in the right locations.
Wow.
So that's something that's appealing to us. As well as we like the bigger projects, and we're going to continue working on Boca Chica Island. We have some fun plans for the future now. We're working on a treehouse design out there And we're doing a bunch of new stuff out there, so we're pretty excited just in general there too.
Josh, you just told us about Panama and Costa Rica, your impressions. I want to do a lightning round here. I want no more than one sentence, maybe two, on each of these countries real quick, okay? Your impressions on Ecuador real estate.
Very undervalued, potential political issues.
Nicaragua.
The cheapest country to live besides Ecuador. Very safe, but again, potential political issues.
Belize.
Belize is expensive, but people speak English.
Honduras.
Honduras, I feel like if you're off the mainland, out in Roatan and the Bay of Islands, it's a bit of a paradise out there and a great option. Anywhere inland, I think you're going to be, there's going to be a negative headlines for years to come about what's happening there.
Guatemala.
Appreciated. Amazing place. Lots of options there, and overblown on the violence front, but you still got to be careful.
El Salvador.
It's really populated, the most populated country in Central America, and seems to really resonate mostly with surfers.
And Mexico.
The biggest, the baddest, the best. I like Mexico. I've always loved it. It's my favorite country in this region. I like how it changes from state to state, provincially, regionally. It's amazing. Personally, I love Chiapas. I love San Cristobal, and I love Oaxaca.
All right, beautiful.
Have you been here to San Miguel de Allende?
No, I have not. I've never been there. And on our drive down, we almost routed through San Miguel, and then we picked to head out to the coast, right, kind of in that region.
Yeah. Well, you have to come up sometime.
You're invited, man.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Well,
James has got a question, and you're perfect person to answer this question because you're kind of like a model. You're a picture-perfect model of what a lot of people from the U.S. really want to do. And so, I mean, you decided you want a more international life. Well, you wanted a life that was more you. And so in line with that, James has a question he asks all our guests.
Yeah, so if there's somebody else who's thinking about doing something like that, maybe they're taking the first steps into copying what you've done or doing something similar, what would be your one best piece of advice that you would give that person?
I guess what I would say is, I think first of all, you got to know who you are. A lot of people end up chasing the dream because they're unhappy, but it's really not a dream down here. That's more of a mirage. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to live, but it comes with its own problems and challenges. And that being said, it's important to try it on a bit and see if it's comfortable for you. The way I mostly describe it is these countries it's a more simple way of life. And if the 2, 3, 4, 5 things that are possible to do in each town appeal to you, you can be really happy. But if your favorite thing is to go look at art galleries, some coastal town in El Salvador is going to be hell for you. And so it's being realistic.
Excellent advice. Josh Linnes of Viva Tropic, thank you for being a guest on the Borderless Podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
What a find, huh?
Oh, yeah, no. He was really great. I hope to do some future collaborating with him and what they're doing down there.
Absolutely. We've talked about that with him, and he's down for it, so we got to do that. And I mean, it's just because we talk about traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, but we don't really talk about investing that much. Right. And now we're going to. And we're going to next week, too, on the next podcast, it looks like. So, folks, man, if you're interested in investing in Central America, even Mexico, we have found a great resource. I was just telling James, man, if you told this guy, I've got so much money I want to invest, maybe in a farm or a house or in something, what would you do? He would tell you, and he would know what the hell he's talking about.
Yeah, and it's just another example of the type of people that we have not only on the podcast but also on the the member side of the website. So we have contact information, and have him or somebody from his website there to that answers people's questions, right. And all kinds of other people like that.
So customer reviews, looks like we got a new one here on October 3rd. Somebody named Slodlos, it looks like. He gave us 5 stars. He said, awesome podcast. And he said, filled with useful information country by country. Please include some information about education for those of us with kids and teens.
Yeah. Okay. That is a topic I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in. So maybe we'll do one only about that in the future.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Slodlos. And So, yeah, we've got a lot of great... thank you very much, guys. I threw out the question, what would be some great dream guests? And it wasn't quite what I was looking for. I guess I thought... Some people did. I thought people were going to say Ron Paul or somebody like that, you know, Doug Casey, you know, which are great ideas. But they, you know, Terrence threw out a lot of great, really practical ideas, people mostly whom I'd never heard of before. But I'm going to get some of those guys on the podcast. They've already agreed to do it, and I'm looking forward to that.
Great.
All right, so as always, another Borderless Podcast coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.